Week 10 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few quarterbacks I looked at off the wire this week. The first quarterback, Drake May of the New England Patriots. So May, he had a concussion in Week 8's game versus the New York Jets. And then Week 9 returned surprisingly. And he just hung in there and played a good ball game, I thought was made. 206 pass yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, 95 rush yards, and a fumble loss. I know he had 3 turnovers, but it was versus a pretty good defense in the Tennessee Titans. So May this week, not a great matchup with the Chicago Bears, but he's been a quarterback that he's finding ways to get the football down the field. He's using his legs to get yards. And so far, in the 3 starts, besides the one where he had to leave early in the game with a concussion, he's had 18 or more fantasy points. Week 6 versus Houston, 243 pass yards, 3 touchdowns, 5 rush, 38 yards, a fumble loss, 2 interceptions. Week 7 at Jacksonville, 276 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 18 rush yards. Week 8 versus the Jets got off to a hot start before the concussion, 23 pass yards, 46 rush yards, a rushing touchdown. And Week 9 at Tennessee, he hung in there and forced that game to overtime. 206 pass yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. Like I said, 95 rush yards and a fumble loss. So Drake May, he's one of the top picks in the NFL draft for a reason. He's got a good arm. He's got good mobility. And with limited weapons in this offense for the New England Patriots, he's going out there and making plays. So he's definitely a quarterback I would add this week. The next quarterback, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. The last couple weeks, Herbert's starting to get things going for fantasy owners in the Los Angeles Chargers. I know Week 10 a tougher matchup versus Tennessee Titans, but Herbert's getting rapport down. Lab McConkey, we saw a couple weeks ago, the big game. Quentin Johnson returned last week's game, 113 yards and found the end zone. And Herbert's starting to find weapons and put up fantasy numbers. Week 8 versus New Orleans, 279 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 49 rush yards. And Week 9 at Cleveland, a big game, 282 pass yards, 2 touchdowns in that one. So like I said, Week 10, a middle-of-the-pack matchup versus Tennessee, even though their defense doesn't travel well so far this season. So if you need a quarterback, Herbert's available right now. Decent amount of leagues, still at 56% of fantasy leagues. Next quarterback, Aaron Rodgers of the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers, he's got great weapons, obviously, on the offense. Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Breece Hall out of the backfield. But Rodgers, it's been up and down for him and this Jet team. But the last couple weeks, he's had 20 or more fantasy points. In Week 10, a pretty good matchup on paper at the Arizona Cardinals. Week 7 at Pittsburgh, 276 pass yards, a touchdown, 2 INTs, a 2-point conversion. Week 8 at the Pats, 233 pass yards, 2 touchdowns. In Week 9, a big game versus the Texans, 211 pass yards and 3 touchdowns. So Week 10, like I said, a decent matchup at Arizona. I know they just shut down the Bears offense in the Week 9 victory, but Arizona does give up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. And when you got weapons, like I said, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, and Breece Hall out of the backfield, you're going to put up numbers with those type of receivers. So Rodgers definitely an ad this week. The next day at Bo Nix, the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix has been a pretty solid rookie year, I think for him so far this season. Bo Nix this season, the last few games, he's gone out there and put up some decent numbers. Week 7 in New Orleans, 164 pass yards, 75 rush yards. Week 8 versus Carolina, monster game, 284 pass yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 rush yards, a rushing touchdown. And Week 9 at Baltimore, 223 pass yards, an interception, 36 rush yards, a catch for 2 yards on a touchdown pass from Cortland Sutton. So Week 10, definitely a tough matchup at the Kansas City Chiefs. Division rival, one of the best defenses, if not the best defense, arguably, in all pro football. And right now, Bo Nix still out there in 66% of fantasy leagues. So obviously, it's a tough game. And then the schedule gets a little bit lighter. Week 11, Atlanta. Week 12 at Vegas. And Week 13 versus Cleveland. So if you want to get him off the waiver wire and put him on your bench if you don't trust the matchup, I still would do that with Bo Nix. And the final quarterback I looked at off the wire is Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. I know Daniel Jones, he hasn't been good this season, but there's some pop games here and there we saw from Daniel Jones. And this week, he's a great streaming option at the Panthers. 4th most points to quarterbacks on the season. Week 8 at Pittsburgh, 264 pass yards, a rush yard, a fumble loss. Week 9 versus the Commanders, 174 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 54 rush yards, a rushing touchdown, a fumble loss. And like I said, Week 10, a great matchup as a streaming option. We have 4 teams on bye on Week 10 here. And Daniel Jones, they got decent weapons in this offense. I think Tyrone Tracy's a pretty good back. Malik Neighbors, he's an up-and-coming receiver. Wandale Robinson. So it's not like there's scrubs on this offense and they can't get anything going. Just inconsistencies have been the problem with Jones. But we also know he'll get you most weeks 3 to 5 fantasy points minimum running the football. So this week with a good matchup at the Panthers. And if you need a streaming option, Jones is out there still in tons of fantasy leagues and 90%. So that's a few quarterbacks I looked at off the wire for week 10 of the fantasy football season.